Okay, I see you have your Christmas cup out already.
Yeah. Yeah, this came out. So we literally the day after Halloween took down all the Halloween decorations and shockingly, my husband got all the Christmas stuff out. He was like, just go wild, which normally he complains when we decorate early, but he was like, just go for it. We're like, yes. So we have our tree up. We have everything. And okay, I found this study. It was a few years ago. They did a study and they said that people who decorate early for Christmas are happier people, which I don't know if that's true, but I do feel like getting in the Christmas spirit makes me a happier person. So
Okay, does that make me a miserable person because I don't decorate for Christmas at all? And
you
so,
never do?
no, I never do.
Well, you
But
don't have
Aaron,
kids though. So I feel like I do it more for my kids than like it's really for me, but I just use them as an excuse, you know?
Erin is a massive, like that. Halloween's her number one holiday, but she decorates for Christmas and she's coming to visit for Christmas, which I'm super excited about.
Ooh.
And so my husband and I were out shopping yesterday and he's like, "Do you want to go into the Christmas store?" And I was like, "No. I don't decorate. I don't need anything." And then I was like, "Well, shit. Aaron's coming. Maybe I should do something." So I bought us like Christmas mugs with our initials on
Oh,
them.
cute. You know what you
And
should
I
do is when she's there, you guys should decorate on like Christmas Eve just for, shits and giggles.
Well, the way I see it, like there's Christmas markets here everywhere. So that's the
Hmm.
compromise in my head is like we'll bake cookies and we'll go to the Christmas markets and the area where I live, they do all the neighborhood decorations. And there's a giant tree outside my house that they put lights on and they totally do the whole thing up. So I'm like, okay, that's the Christmas tree. It's just outside and not in the house.
Oh, nice. Okay, so you go to Germany quite a bit, right? They go all out for Christmas? Because I remember that from when I was a kid and we went there.
Almost every country here does.
That's
And
awesome.
last year, I think we went to Austria and then different places here in the Czech Republic. And they all decorate. They all have Christmas markets everywhere. It is really the coolest thing. And for someone like me who's not super Christmassy, and even growing up, my mom decorated like crazy. And maybe that's why I don't do it because it was so much work watching her take
Yeah.
everything out of the attic and decorate absolutely everything and to help put everything away. And I don't know, maybe I took it for granted, but I don't do it. But the markets are awesome. So I am excited about that.
Well, we'll see how I feel December 1st because I feel like whenever we decorate early, by the time December rolls around, I'm like, ugh, like I just want to get all this shit out of my house. So we'll see. And my kids are breaking ornaments like by the hour. So I don't know what I was thinking. But I mean, it does get me in like a kind of like a happy, like, ooh, Christmas is coming, you know?
Well,
And
I think too, because I always had big dogs and having a Christmas tree in a small place with big dogs is just like it doesn't work out very well.
okay, funny story, real quick. We won't make the whole episode about Christmas, but I have to say, when we had our first dog, Gypsy, she was a chow, and she was like a good dog. She didn't really get into a lot of stuff. So we get together, I put the Christmas tree up, and I had these like glittery ornaments. I put them everywhere. We came home, and the ornaments were all gone from the bottom of the tree. And we were like, did she eat them? Like she will like die. Oh my God. And we're freaking out. Well, she ate them because there was glitter when she went to the bathroom everywhere, but she was like
Sure.
totally fine. Nothing happened to her. She ate the freaking ornaments and she was completely a-okay. And we were like so concerned. We're like, she's gonna have to have surgery. It was the craziest thing. So for when we until she passed away, we had the ornaments like halfway up the tree and then the bottom of the tree was bare. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, I had two Great Danes and their tails are just like whips.
Oh yeah.
And so it was just not, it didn't work out very well to have a Christmas tree. And I've just never had one since.
We had a
But
Great Dane growing up. And see, this is why I'm just going to talk forever now. But we had a Great Dane growing up and the tail was so out of control. We had blood on the wall by where she would go and sit because she would like whack her tail on the
yes.
wall and it would start bleeding. It
Yeah.
was really like bad. And but she didn't seem bothered by it, but it looked like, oh my God, like what that's got to be painful.
Yeah, between their like tails that are like whips and their drool everywhere, like the walls were just covered in slobber all the time and like snot. It was so gross, but they were great dogs.
Yeah, I love dogs. So no,
Well,
nothing to do with what we're talking about today,
no,
right?
no, but you know what? I'm always happy to talk about dogs.
Yep.
But so I'm sure you saw, but the election results for Nevada and Arizona finally came in over the weekend. And that's just so fucking awesome that Trump swept all seven battleground states.
I
Like, is that
know.
fucking cool or what?
Yeah, and honestly, like I was hoping for a red wave, but after the midterms, is that what they call them, right? The midterms,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
I
midterms.
was like, maybe it's not going to happen because I thought for sure it was going to happen then. And I mean, the fact that every single swing state voted for him, I'm just like still kind of blown away. Like I knew it deep down, but I'm just surprised that they let it happen without massive interference.
Yeah, this was a legit red wave. And I think the final electoral count was 312 for Trump and 226 for Harris. And okay, but we still have no results for the House. So I checked right before the podcast, and the seats currently stand at 203 for the Democrats and 214 for the GOP. But there's still, again, dozens of seats outstanding.
Okay, I don't understand how that's possible. So, first of all, I think that Nevada and Arizona should have to explain exactly what happened that they took this long to get the results. Like, I just think it's unacceptable. Like, you don't have your shit together, clearly. But this is why people don't trust the election because when it takes this long, then people like me just start assuming there's some shady shit going on and they're trying to like rig it somehow. And that's why they're not telling us. And so I just think it's like, unacceptable and they should be called out on it. Um, but it reminds me, did you listen to Tucker's interview with Vivek?
Yes, I
Mm.
did. Great
That was
interview.
a good one. Normally, I will not sit through like that long of an interview, but oh man, I did. And one of the things they were talking about was the voter machines. And I'm not going to say the name of the company because I had no idea that one of the voting machine companies sued Tucker and like tried to destroy his life. And so he's telling Vivek the story, and Vivek's like, wait a minute. What was the reasoning? Like, I don't remember when that all switched over to electronic voting machines. What was the reasoning for putting these machines in the first place? And Tucker's like, well, the reason they told everyone was that you would get faster, more accurate results. And they both just start laughing because it's a joke. It's like,
Yeah.
and it never crossed my mind until he asked that question. But like, why are we still using them if they clearly are not doing what they're meant to do? And instead of faster, accurate results, it's now being dragged out for days. And in 2020, it was like months. So I don't know. I just think we need to like maybe talk about getting rid of those and going back to the old school way, like you had mentioned a while back. Just get the paper ballots out and do a hand count. Like,
Yeah, I think Vivek even said it on the podcast. He's like, paper ballots, ID, you know the results by the end of the night, end of story.
yeah. But apparently, if you ask that question, you get sued because Tucker knows all about that. So that's why I'm not mentioning the name of the company. But I just think that's crazy. I had no idea they were like going after Tucker for bringing all this stuff up.
Okay, I can't remember if this was the Vivek interview or another one that Tucker did because I listened to like three interviews this weekend, but they were talking about how when it came to the tally of the votes, 18 of the 19 states that Harris like technically won in were all states that don't require voter ID or that have like voter ID is optional. So I think
I
um,
saw that.
which is crazy, right? I guess
Yeah.
12 of the states don't require any documentation and then the rest are like, well, it's not required, but you can or can't show it's your choice. Um, so I'm sorry, but I don't think she actually got all the votes that they say she got because there's no fucking way that all of those votes were legal in those states.
Yeah.
because those are, especially with all the sanctuary cities, and you're looking at the major blue states, California, Oregon, Maine, New York, like Hawaii, Maryland. It just doesn't add up to me. And it goes with what you said on the last podcast when we were talking about, like, oh, where did the extra, what was it, 20 million
Yeah.
votes go?
They're just gone. It's like, oh, those people, just 20 million people decided not to vote in the most
Right.
important election of our lifetime. Bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think a lot of people are waking up and realizing. Like, even people that were super against, there was no election interference in 2020 are looking at that and saying, how does 20 million votes just disappear? Like, it
Right.
makes no sense. But I do agree with you. I think there probably was some shady stuff going on. So he probably had an even bigger landslide than what we're seeing
Yeah.
because if
Because,
all of those states don't have voter ID, and where's all
yeah.
the illegals that the Democrats thought for sure were gonna vote for them, and they were fighting so hard to make it, you know, where you couldn't take them off the voter rolls. Clearly, they didn't show up to the polls for her.
Yeah, maybe only
Or
in
maybe they
those
did.
maybe in those 19 states,
Yeah.
but it shows very clear that all the rest of the states that had voter ID laws, fucking Trump swept it.
Yep.
And even cooler, it was reported by the New York Post that Trump received the highest raw count of the popular vote of any Republican presidential candidate ever, like ever. And this is even including Trump's own prior record from the 2020 election. And I guess, again, I still don't understand this, but California, Alaska, Arizona, Maryland, Oregon, and Utah are still counting votes. And there's like 5 million votes outstanding. But Republicans haven't won the popular vote since 2004, and that was George W. Bush. And so for Trump to receive like the highest count of any Republican candidate ever, that's just so fucking cool.
Yeah. And I'm seeing all of these leftists on TikTok that are saying like, oh, there's still hope because there's still, ballots that haven't been counted. And I'm like, okay, you spent 4 years calling us election deniers, but now you're denying the results of the election. Like, just hilarious to me and so ridiculous. And then Elon Musk, he posted the map where it shows the counties. And that everyone should go on Twitter, look at that post because it's crazy. It's truly like red everywhere and then a couple specks of blue on the East Coast and the West Coast, and that is it. It's insane. Um, so I know we already did an episode on like all the crazy leftists and their reaction to Trump winning. But I have to play this clip. It's of Lindy Lee, who is on the DNC Finance Committee. And I thought she had some interesting things to say. So listen to this.
I actually think President Biden, the whole endorsing her 30 minutes after he dropped out, I think that was a big FU to the party. You don't want me, here's somebody that you may not like, but deal with it. This is just an epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster. Actually, it was 1 billion 18 million, I think, right? There are 20 million or 20 million or 18 million dollars in debt. Right. It's incredible. And I raised millions of that. I have friends that I have to be accountable to and to explain what happened because I told them it was a margin of error raise. The Trump campaign was touting all of these incredible empirical data weeks before election night. What Harris is touting was the door knocking. She didn't say anything really about early voting. Now I know it's because there was nothing much to say.
So they're all like turning on themselves, like we were talking about last week. Um, but it's just interesting that she spent $1 billion, which I think is an actual record. I think that's like the most that any candidate has spent, yet there's still 18 or 20 million dollars in debt. Like, how does that happen?
And the amount of money that was spent on celebrity shit, like having
Yeah.
performances and concerts, and then to lose like this, it's rich.
It is. And then this really shocked me. I thought it was like just a joke going around, but did you hear that Trump is actually offering to pay Kamala's campaign debt? So that
No.
$20 million. Yeah. Like literally I thought it was fake, but then I was like, this is probably him just being like, fuck you, like I have more money than you do. I don't know. But I looked and he actually did post it. He said, quote, I'm very surprised that the Democrats who fought a hard and valiant fight in the 2020 presidential election, raised a record amount of money, didn't have lots of money left over. Now they're being squeezed by vendors and others. Whatever we can do to help them during this difficult period, I would strongly recommend we as a party and for the sake of desperately needed unity, do. We have a lot of money left over, and that our biggest asset in the campaign was quote unquote earned media, and that doesn't cost very much. Make America great again. So I feel
Wow.
like it was like a gesture for unity, but also kind of like a fuck you, like we had to earn everything. We didn't have to spend all the money kind of thing.
That has to be a fuck you. It
That's
really does. You
that's
know
what
who
I'm
should be,
thinking.
should be paying for that is fucking like Bill Gates and
Yeah.
what's his name? What's the dude? Why am I forgetting his name?
Soros.
Yes, Soros. Soros should be paying for fucking Kamala's campaign debt.
Right. And so they're like, if it's $20 million, well, 10 million went to Beyonce for a 3 minute
Right.
speech. It's like when you spend $1 billion and you lose to that level, like there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. So
Yes.
it's just crazy. But then I was cracking up because RFK, so anytime you see him talk, he just seems very serious, but he is so funny on social media. He like is posting stuff all the time that keeps me laughing. So the latest one I saw, he posts, "Hey, anyone see Fauci? I'm looking for him." And everyone's going wild in the comments because it's like, he is going to go full force after Fauci. He wrote a whole book about the guy.
Well, you know what? You mentioned this to me, and I'm like, that's a really good question because what have we heard about Fauci? Like nothing. So I looked it up online and I went through Google and looked for any articles on Fauci, and it's like crickets. There is nothing at all on this guy since September when he was hospitalized with West Nile virus. And like, tell me that's not ironic.
He's probably in Ukraine right now, hiding in a bunker or something.
I wouldn't be
It's crazy.
surprised.
I mean, I think a lot of those people are going to be fleeing. There's like all these young women like in their 20s that are posting just stupid shit. Like one girl's like, I went and I got my birth certificate, my social security card, I printed my transcripts, I got my passport, and you should all be doing this too. And I'm like, are you here illegally? Like, do you think he's going to deport you? Because if you're a legal citizen, like, why are you getting all that stuff? Like, it's just so ridiculous.
But it's like I said on Friday, please leave.
Yeah,
Like, just go.
exactly. We don't need you here anymore. I'm sure go to Europe where, they only allow abortions to 12 weeks and then come back and complain. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, back to RFK. Like I'm loving this guy. I cannot wait to see everything he implements. But already what he's doing is he created this site called policysforthepeople.com where the American people can go and we can submit whatever we want to see, like bills we want to see, bans we want to see, things we agree with, things we don't. And he's getting feedback directly from the people. And then he said that him and Trump and their administration are going to review it quarterly. Like, how amazing is that? And it's like you think, oh, well, we have representatives for each state. Yeah, well, clearly they're not doing a very good job of, listening to the people. So this is a way we can directly send our opinion and our feedback to the Trump administration, which I think is awesome. And then the other big thing is like the biggest point he was critical of Trump for was that when Trump got in office last time, he had like all these lobbyists and stuff that got into the administration, which he admits. He's like, I had to fill 4,000 positions. I didn't know anyone. I was an outsider. So he trusted the wrong people. And that's why he had so many, people in the deep state that were like in his administration as well. So he told RFK, like, help me. You help me find the right people. So RFK sets up another website and it's called Nominees for the People. And if anyone wants to go to it, it's nominees.mahanow.org. And you can go on there and nominate anyone that you want to see fill Trump's more than 4,000 administration roles. So you can nominate people, like Vivek, for example, or you can nominate yourself, your next door neighbor, like anyone that you feel is qualified, you can throw their name in the hat. And so right now, like when you go on, it has like the top big positions and who the big names are that are coming up. So it's kind of interesting because I feel like it's another election where we can kind of like see who the top contenders are, you know?
Yeah, it's actually pretty awesome. And I don't know about you, but I've never seen anything like this before. Like where the
Never.
people get input like this.
Yep.
And like you were saying, like anyone can go on there. They can vote for their favorite nominee. There's 12 areas of government where you can vote. And you can see like who's in the lead for some of these nominations. And there's some names on there I don't understand, like Pete Buttigieg is high up on the list to stay in like transportation. But I was happy to see like Brandon Herrera and Dan Bongino have been nominated for the Peace at Home. It's called like the Justice, Security, and Immigration role. And last I checked, I was looking last night. I didn't look at it this morning, but Ron Paul had the lead so far for the economy. You had Vivek, Charlie Kirk, and Candace Owens as the top three names in education. And then in the Peace Abroad category, Seth Keshel is in the lead, followed by Tulsi Gabbard. And I don't know who Seth Keshel is, but do you?
I've never heard of him. Um, but with the website, like I was so confused at first because I remember seeing Pete Buttigieg and I was like, what the heck? And then next to him, there was like a number, like a high number. And I'm like, oh my God, are those votes? It's not. Like when you click into it, those are all comments of people like basically
Oh.
saying, don't fucking put this guy in there.
Oh, okay, I thought those were the votes.
That's what I thought too. And I was like, there is no way. Like, what? But no, it was like all these comments of people being like, is this a joke? Like, there's no
Okay.
way. So I think it's good because they're not saying you can't put those people's name in the hat. Like, they're still listing it. And clearly the comments are showing this is not what the people want. So
Okay, that
don't,
makes me feel better that
I know, because I was panicked. I was like, oh, hell no. Like, this cannot be. So, something else though that I think is really cool, it's a great idea, is Trump wants to move a lot of these federal agencies and departments out of Washington, D.C. and into like red states, like he had mentioned, like Kansas, for example. And it makes so much sense because if you truly want to drain the swamp, it's going to be really hard recruiting, 4,000 people to be in your administration that are all coming from DC, which is basically like one big swamp where it's super biased, everyone's indoctrinated, but also it gives people across the country like the opportunity to participate and it's like moving into places that would be less expensive for like federal buildings and things like that. So I don't know. I think it's a really good idea and it'll discourage leftists because, they're not going to want to move somewhere like Kansas, you know?
yeah, this is one of the things that Tucker and Vivek were talking about on their podcast recently. And this is one of the things I loved about Vivek's campaign when he was running for president was this like fucking dismantle the bureaucracy thing. And one of the things he said with Tucker was about they were talking about Congress and he was saying the easiest thing to do with Congress is to mandate that they show up to work every day like normal Americans who work 9 to 5 jobs. And he's like, that would probably get rid of at least like 25% of the lifers in Congress right now because they don't have to show up for work on a regular basis. And he said a lot of them wouldn't stay.
Yeah, remember when we looked up Kamala's record and she was absent 50% of the time?
Mhm.
50%. It's like ridiculous how much they don't show up. So I think that's a great idea. Make them actually do what they're paid almost $200,000 or more to do,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. And he also said, like, this is a once in a century opportunity for structural change in our government bureaucracy. And he believes Trump knows what's at stake and he's going to actually make the changes this time. And I think he's absolutely right because Trump's starting to put his cabinet together. There's like 15 main executive positions to fill, and he is not fucking around this time. And Don Jr. reposted the most awesome comment on X over the weekend. I guess there's a right-wing comedian who wrote, quote, "We need maximum pressure to keep all neocons and war hawks out of the Trump administration," end quote. And Don Jr. replied, quote, "Agreed, I'm on it," end quote. So I want to play this short clip from Fox News where he gives some insight into how people for Trump's cabinet are going to be chosen.
Transition. I want to make sure now that we know who the real players are, the people who will actually deliver on the president's message, the people who don't think that they know better than the duly elected president of the United States. I want to make sure that those people are in his cabinet. I want to make sure that those people are in this administration.
Okay, I think that's pretty awesome. And like,
Here, recap what he said because I couldn't hear it very well.
He said, "I'm going to be heavily involved in the transition. I want to make sure now that we know who the real players are, the people who will actually deliver on the president's message, the people who don't think they know better than the duly elected president of the United States. I want to make sure that these people are in his cabinet. I want to make sure that these people are in his administration."
Amazing.
Yes.
I wonder if Don Jr. is going to be a part of it. Like, I know Ivanka was before, and now she doesn't want to be in politics at all, which I get. But I wonder if Don Jr. is going to be like his right-hand man, kind of.
That would be cool. I love Don Jr. And like, did you see this is like unrelated, but it's Don Jr. So on Saturday, he posted on Instagram, it was a video of Zelensky like looking totally unhappy next to Trump. And the caption was, quote, "POV, point of view. You're 38 days away from losing your allowance," end quote.
I know. He is seriously hilarious. Like, he's the first person that shows up at the top of my Instagram feed because I just watch everything he posts because everything is funny. Like, of all the stuff that they have thrown at him and his family, to be able to laugh like that and just kind of make fun of it all is incredible. And he's just like such a good guy.
You look at his whole family, right? Trump's whole
Mhm.
family, and they are all like well-adjusted, pro-America, these amazing kids that grew up into be these very responsible adults and like even as young kids. Then you look at fucking Kamala's stepdaughter who has
Yep.
like major mental illness problems, and like I'm seeing all sorts of crazy shit about her in the news right now. And it's
Mhm.
like that right there just says
And
enough.
Biden's kids,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, it's like
Yeah,
they're
they're all
all messed
fucked up.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Um, Speaking of funny stuff on the internet, did you see Candace Owens? She went on this like whole thing where she is seriously recommending Alex Jones as the press secretary. And she's like, I will pay his salary. She's like, I will raise money. I will do whatever I have to do to pay his salary. Trump, just get him in the position of press secretary. And I'm like, oh my God, could you imagine Alex Jones up there dealing with these reporters? Like, it would be a sight to see for sure.
It would actually be kind of cool. I mean, he is a bit of a nut job, but I'm sorry, like he's kind of like some weird Nostradamus because we've
Yeah.
talked about this so many times. That guy has predicted so much crazy shit that's come true, and he's entertaining to listen to. So I think he'd be much better than KJP.
Oh my God, anyone would be better than her. You got to be so happy that you don't have to deal with her much longer.
Yeah, I am elated. Okay, but who is being considered for Trump's cabinet? Because it kind of depends on what source you're looking at. The speculation is all over the place. And it's fun to watch because you're seeing how all these people are vying for cabinet positions. And he's already announced a few of the top positions, which is really cool.
Yeah, like the big news that I heard was he's appointed his senior campaign advisor, Susie Wiles, to be the White House chief of staff. And this is the first time in history that a woman will hold that position. So here you have Trump, who's, you know, this misogynist that hates women, that hired a woman as his White House chief of staff who was working, like she was the mastermind behind his campaign, is kind of the way he's painting it. And it's really funny because when you go and look at news articles, all of the mainstream news, they're just saying Susie Wiles to be White House chief of staff. They're not commenting on the fact that this is historical because she's the first woman ever. Because they don't want to admit that
which you'd think the MSM would be, because they're all about the firsts, right? But you know who is talking about it is Fox News, and they did an interview with Steve Cortez on Saturday. And to be honest, I really didn't know much about her at all. But I want to play this clip and then a clip from Megyn Kelly's show that will give anyone else who doesn't know who she is a good idea of what this woman stands for.
House, we are joined by former senior advisor to both President-elect Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, Steve Cortez. Steve, welcome to the show. Great to see you.
Thank you, Anita. Great to see you.
Yep. So it is a very exciting time in Washington. Everybody jockeying for a position in this new administration. A number of people being considered. But President Trump's first pick is a historic one. The first woman, Susie Wiles, to take on the chief of staff role. I did have some interaction with her when I was a local reporter in Florida years ago. Everybody knew her to be a straight shooter and a gatekeeper at that time for the mayor of Jacksonville. What do you expect her to bring to this role in the White House?
Well, look, let me first say that Susie Wiles has more than earned this incredible opportunity because of what she did as the architect and strategist behind the biggest Republican win since the 1980s. And I would add not just this race, but what she's done in the state of Florida, a place that used to be a swing state, used to be a nail biter, and is no longer. She's largely responsible for that, for the state of Florida being so reliably red. What I think she's going to bring to the White House is what she did during the campaign. If you noticed, Anita, what she did, which is what good campaign managers do, she was behind the scenes. She never became the story herself. Those same attributes make for a good chief of staff, meaning that she will be a manager and a delegator who exercises power, but does it in a way where they don't become part of the spotlight. And I think that's what she'll bring to the White House, that kind of order and discipline, and also that humility of somebody who doesn't necessarily need to get the credit or to be in front of cameras, but will be that kind of effective manager that Trump and Vance need in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so I thought that was pretty interesting.
And it's different from what we currently see because typically the people that get these positions are the people that are out for themselves. Like they want to make a name for themselves. And she's definitely not one of those people. So that's really cool.
No, and I didn't know she had this long history either. But I do want to play this clip from Charlie Kirk talking to Megyn Kelly because he went even further into stuff about her.
And boy, there's a team of all-stars coming together that I think is going to make a lot of people happy. We are going to sprint out of the gate. There will be a lot of reversals and also a return to common sense and order and decency. So I'm thrilled and Susie Wiles is a phenomenal pick to do that. But anyway, I don't want to digress too much on that. I'm just saying that.
No, that's thrilling.
The Department of Education is definitely going to be a focal point of ours.
Can you talk about Susie Wiles? Because she ran Trump's campaign. She used to work for DeSantis. It didn't end particularly well. Then she moved over to Team Trump and, they made history. So now she's going to be his chief of staff, which I don't know her well, but I like the idea of somebody who was able to manage, I'm using air quotes, Trump, as well as anybody can, quote, manage Trump, right? Like, I think outside of Melania, almost nobody can do that, right? But I know she kept him in between the bumpers for, I would say, at least 80% of his campaign, which is an amazing feat. So what do you expect from her?
Well, first of all, she's spectacular. Let me tell you two things that I think are important. Number one is she never, ever tried to manipulate Trump on who he talked to, how he was receiving information, which is something every other chief of staff or person prior in that role would do. They try to cut off access. They said, look, it's the president's prerogative. He could do what he wants to do. She would remain so consistent with that, which was awesome. At the same time, she was able to organize a very diverse cast of characters to be able to get towards this mission. But let me tell you why I really have respect for Susie Wiles. If we would have lost Megyn, Susie Wiles almost assuredly would have gone to federal prison. Let's just be honest. Anybody close to Trump would have, and they'll think about it, and she knew that. She risked her entire professional career, which was an excellent one. She risked her entire life because there would have been a revenge campaign, which either they would have gone to her to go rat on Trump or whatever, right? On fake stuff. And someone who is willing to risk that, given the lawfare state, is someone who is deserving of being a White House chief of staff. Not someone on the outside. She put it all on the line for her country because everyone enters Trump orbit, and myself included, and Elon, we kind of knew that if things wouldn't go our way, all of our get out the vote, all of our organizations were going to come under incredible scrutiny. You know how it is. I mean, these people, as they would say in the video, petty, and they want to eliminate and they want to try to turn the country into one party rule like California. So Susie Wiles knew the stakes. I want everyone to understand this. Susie Wiles leaned in when Donald Trump received the Mar-a-Lago raid. She leaned in when Donald Trump received the January 6 indictments. How many people in politics would do that? There was no hedging. There was no backup plan. She said, we're going to win this thing. We are going to go get this thing done. And she was unfazed, focused like a heat-seeking missile to get Donald Trump back in the White House. And so that speaks to her character, her tenacity. And let's be honest, until we get the FBI figured out, they're going to try to do Peter Strzok Smirk Crossfire Hurricane again. And I said this to the team yesterday. I said, guys, first couple of days of the administration, don't be surprised if an FBI agent shows up again like Peter Strzok and tries to get you guys to say something, and he does a 302, and next thing you know, they try to Michael Flynn you again. Susie Wiles will never turn on Donald Trump. They will, and other people that were being contemplated, I don't know, but Susie Wiles will remain loyal to the country and to Trump, and also she's wicked smart.
So that made me feel really good.
Yeah. Well, and you think about it, like even the leftist media is saying that this is the biggest political comeback in history. And she was the person that orchestrated that. So it's like, we should be all studying this. And that reminds me, last night I come across this TikTok, and it's this kid who's a political science major. And he's like, I honestly am not like pro-Trump or hate Trump. Like I'm very, neutral, because he's still young, like he's in college. So this happens. He goes to class and he asks his political science professor, are we going to study the Trump campaign? Because truly it was a great campaign and it made history. And the professor laughs at him and is like, no. And he's like, so he goes on TikTok and he's like, now I get it. He said, I was not like pro-Trump or anything, but now I kind of am, because I see how the whole system is set up against him. And he's like, this guy, he's teaching political science. He should be like, yes, absolutely. We need to dissect this entire campaign because clearly it worked. And we're not even allowed to talk about it in our political science class. And I'm like, that's crazy, but a good point.
And this is why our education system needs to be completely fucking overhauled. And I really hope it happens.
Well, okay, so I listened to that episode with Charlie Kirk and Megyn Kelly. It sounded like he is like going to, I mean, and maybe he's just trying to get the role, but he sounded like he's very actively involved, because he kept saying like, we're going to get rid of the Department of Education. Here's how we're going to make it work. Like he's already actively involved. So I think he might be a part of the administration. Who knows?
He's got to be, for all that he did with getting students to vote in this campaign was huge. And I didn't even realize until I listened to that episode how many young people voted for Trump, because I usually think of young people as being more left, and all the shit that Charlie did on college campuses, like he wasn't even taking credit for it. Like Megyn Kelly was praising him for it. But that guy was fucking on campuses day in and day out, having these debates about Trump. And he really changed a lot of people's minds.
That was really a sight to see, because I followed him for a long time. And even just 2 years ago, he'd be on these campuses just getting wrecked. I mean, there would be mobs trying to kick him off, throwing things at him. He put up with a lot of shit. And then all of a sudden you started like seeing things shift to where now the mob was a mob of kids in MAGA hats. And I say mob, but they were all like very respectful, but they were like cheering him on. So he went from being hated and like kicked off of campuses to all of these students showing up and like embracing him. So he really created a movement on the university level. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, which is truly awesome. I think he was saying like nobody from the left was even taking him seriously because they just thought it was a joke. And then next thing you know, he's having these debates on campus with 4 or 5,000 students showing up. And like that is just so fucking cool. So I really hope he does play some kind of role in Trump's cabinet. But that Fox clip I played earlier, they put up this picture on the screen and I have no idea where it came from, but it was listing like the potentials for different positions. And so Secretary of State showed Marco Rubio, Bill Hagerty, and Rick Grinnell. And Secretary of Defense potentials included Mike Pompeo, Mike Waltz, and Mike Rogers. And then I read in Politico that Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton's also a possibility. And did you listen to Tucker's episode yesterday with Eldridge Colby?
No.
Okay. I had no idea who he was, but he's a national security expert, and I guess his name is being tossed around. And they were talking about how a lot of these possible picks, like the names I just read off, how they're part of the establishment that haven't even been on board with Trump's vision. And so Tucker asked, like, why are any of them even being considered? And I think that's a great question. And so Colby agreed, and he's like, someone needs to be in these positions. The people need to be willing to buck the system, like Trump bucked the system. And so I was really happy when I saw Trump post on Saturday on Truth Social that Mike Pompeo, who, if you guys don't know, it's the former Secretary of State, he will not be considered as a cabinet choice, which made me happy. And neither will Nikki Haley, who was Trump's former UN ambassador. And I'm just so fucking glad because neither of them are aligned with Trump's politics at all.
I was so glad to hear this. They are definitely deep state for sure. Nikki Haley's like Miss Queen of the military industrial complex. And I'm relieved because Trump never said bad things about them. I mean, I guess Nikki Haley, like when he was up against her, but he's been very gracious in talking about them. And so I was kind of nervous that he was going to trust them again, but I'm glad to see he's not. And then you mentioned Rick Grinnell. And I think it's important to note that Rick Grinnell was in his first administration. He was the director of national intelligence, and he was also the first openly gay holder of a cabinet level position in the history of the United States. So Trump, that supposedly hates gay people, hired the first openly gay man in his cabinet the first term. So I just wanted to point that out real quick.
Yeah, not Obama and not Biden.
Exactly. Yep.
And so one of the things that I think is important, that I think a lot of America thinks is important, is who's going to be like in charge of Homeland Security, right? And so on that Fox News post, they had Chad Wolf and Tom Homan as the top picks. And yesterday, Trump posted on Truth Social that it was going to be Homan. And the post said, quote, "I'm pleased to announce that former ICE director and stalwart on border control, Tom Homan, will be joining the Trump administration in charge of our nation's borders." And then Trump put in parentheses, "the border czar." And then he said, "including but not limited to the southern border, the northern border, all maritime and aviation security. I've known Tom for a long time, and there's nobody better at policing and controlling our borders. Likewise, Tom Homan will be in charge of all deportation of illegal aliens back to their country of origin. Congratulations to Tom. I have no doubt he will do a fantastic and long-awaited for job," end quote.
Oh, this guy deserves it. He deserves it. He has been so outspoken. I can't tell you how many times he directly to Democrats, he went off on them in hearings, you know, telling them that they're wrong and spitting out the facts and dealing with a lot of bullshit. And he stuck through it. I mean, he put his neck on the line, and he absolutely deserves that role. And he will get things straightened out. I mean, you talk about a real border czar, that guy will do it for sure.
And he's got the background. Like he was the acting director of ICE during Trump's first presidency. He like started his career as a cop in New York. He worked for the Border Patrol as an agent, an investigator, and a supervisor. And I think now he's part of the Heritage Foundation as well. And so like he has the experience. I think he's a really great choice. And then if we're looking at Attorney General, the possibilities I've seen are Utah Senator Mike Lee and then Ken Paxton. And the only person I saw for the DOE spot was Doug Burgum. Like, what are your thoughts on these?
Okay, I know I've heard Mike Lee and Doug Burgum's name before, but I don't really know a whole lot about them. But Ken Paxton, like, absolutely, I think he needs a position. I mean, first of all, remember they were like trying to I think they were trying to either sue him or arrest him, but they were going after him big time. But this was the guy, the only guy that the Guatemalan government trusted to go to when they cracked the child trafficking scheme that was happening. They didn't go to the Biden Kamala administration. They went directly to Ken Paxton and he went public with it, even when they were like trying to go after him in court. And so I think he's earned a position. And I don't know, like I would go for him just because the other two I don't really know much about.
Yeah, he's one of the leading names on RFKJ's website as well for like the top picks.
Good. I hope he gets it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to be excited about this. Thomas Massie was already named Secretary of Agriculture. So that's like your favorite congressman, right? And
Yeah,
I think it's official, isn't it?
I don't know because I couldn't find anything confirming it.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw a bunch of like articles and people were talking about it. So I'm assuming that's a solid choice, but who knows? I mean, I think everything's kind of up in the air until he's actually in office, right?
If it is Massey, I will be super fucking happy because ever since he did that interview with Tucker a few months ago, I was just like, who is this guy? Right? Like, he's crazy smart. He's got an engineering background. That whole interview, I learned about his life. Like, he's totally lives off grid with his family on a cattle farm. And it's like completely self sustaining and solar powered. And he built his house from scratch using all materials from his own land, like the wood and the rocks from his own land. And he's not a radical conservative. He's like a libertarian. And he calls himself the greenest member of Congress, which legitimately he basically is. And he's one of the only members of Congress who calls out both the left and the right on government spending. Remember that fucking clip, Stephanie, I played back in September? It was like 7 minutes long, and he was just ripping into Congress about the insanity of government spending with the omnibus bill. And he kept calling the whole thing political theater. And like that just made me like him even more because he is like a walk the walk, talk the talk kind of guy. And I know that he will get shit done. So even though I didn't see anything confirming him, if it's him, like, fuck yeah.
I know. I'd be so excited. I was so excited when he called it political theater because I'm like, yes, I agree 100%. One big theater performance, but he has common sense and he's not afraid to speak up. He doesn't take money from these lobbying, people and organizations. Like he's not bought. So he would be a great, great pick. And I guess like as the advisor to him or whoever ends up being the Secretary of Agriculture, they're talking about Joel Salatin, which I'm not familiar with him, but I guess he's been on like Joe Rogan a bunch of times. RFK knows him really well. And he's a regenerative organic farmer. And he has been, I guess, very outspoken. The left has been after him like crazy, but he is all about making America healthy again. And he's not afraid to go up against this big system and fight it. And he's brought a lot of like interesting information to light. So yeah, like get those people who aren't bought, who have spent years in this battle. I think they deserve those types of positions for sure.
Well, since you brought up the whole health thing, like that's one of the things that I was interested in seeing on that website RFK Jr. put together. Like whose names being thrown out for like the food and agriculture stuff. And Do you know who Zen Honeycutt is? I guess she's the executive director of Moms Across America, which I've heard about that before, but I the name is not familiar. Like, is she the one that's doing the fighting against food additives and getting rid of toxins, or is that someone
So the
else?
one that I follow is Vanny Hari. She's the one that like started the Kellogg's boycott. She got Starbucks and Subway to completely like change their menu. But I have heard a lot about Moms Across America. I just don't know like who the moms are that founded it. And so that's a great organization as well. Like I think all of those people who have been out there making progress on their own, yeah, put them all in the cabinet because you know there's going to be like directors, but there's also going to be a bunch of other positions. And those are the types of people that we need. And I mean, the person I'm most familiar with is Vanny just because I follow her. But it's like if one individual has already accomplished all of these major feats with big, huge companies like Starbucks and Kellogg's, then just imagine what they can do when they have funding and they don't have to like raise the funds on their own and rely on social media.
Where they're actually being backed by the government instead of
Mhm.
fighting the government?
Yep. And Casey and Callie Means. I cannot
Yes.
believe I haven't heard their name yet, but like put them both in there. I know Callie's been, he used to be a lobbyist. Like he's worked on RFK's campaign. So I would imagine he'll be in there, but get Casey Means in there. I mean, she needs to do something with the whole health and food agenda. She would be amazing. Someone else I saw on the website that was nominated was Dr. Robert Malone. And I think it was for the Department of Health. So he was one of the inventors of the mRNA technology who ended up like coming out during COVID and saying like, what are we doing? This needs to stop. And he was very outspoken. He was banned on Twitter, like censored everywhere. But he was like one of the main people that was bringing awareness around what was happening. And they completely destroyed his career, his livelihood, his reputation, everything. And I mean, if he could get a role in the administration and just be vindicated after all the crap he went through, I think that would be such a sight to see because they ruined his life.
And that's what I would love to see. It's like people in his cabinet being the people who actually stood up for our freedoms and stood against everything that was being all the propaganda coming from the left and all the people whose lives got fucked
Mhm.
by the leftist agenda getting vindicated with positions in Trump's cabinet because you can't argue that those are the people who stuck by the truth.
And it was the truth. Like we know
Yeah.
that now. Everything he said that they were like, oh, it's misinformation, we now know for a fact was true. I mean, the guy is a genius. He invented the damn technology. Like I think if anyone would know, he would know, and he did, and they censored him. And so like, yeah, what a great comeback that would be. Um, just for him and for everyone that spoke up during that time. I think that would be incredible. So I was glad to see his name on the list.
Yeah, another name that I've seen being tossed around is Kash Patel and like in
Mm.
some kind of national security role. And I have a lot of respect for him. And then there has to be like some kind of prominent role for Vivek somewhere. There's got to be something for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like these people that were so prominent in Trump's campaign, they've got to have roles.
Okay, I have a stupid question. I actually feel really dumb for asking this. I think I know the answer because Kamala was vice president, but then she would still vote to like be the tiebreaker. So like let's say that Marjorie Taylor Greene gets a position. Does she still get her vote in Congress or does that go up for election and they get someone else in? Like, I wonder how that all works because Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, it's like their votes are really important in Congress. So, like, what happens there?
I don't have an answer. I'm going to have to look that up because I have no idea. I
It'd be
can't
cool
imagine
if
they
they could
stay
still
in
vote, but I don't think that that's going to be the case. I think they'd have to.
leave that position. Yeah.
Right. And then does that open it up then for like a Democrat to come in? You know, that's what I would be worried about.
Ah.
But they should like they are qualified, but Yeah, it just makes me a little curious, especially if the house is like as tight as they're saying it's going to be.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. I hadn't even thought about that. I
Okay, well, I
guess.
don't feel as stupid then because I'm like,
Okay.
this is probably an obvious answer, but I don't know how it works.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons that I like talking about all this stuff because even as we're going through some of these people, there are names where like I recognize their names from being in Congress or I've heard them on the news somewhere, but we don't know a lot about some of these people. And you brought up a really good question because I'm sure you're not the only one with that question. And obviously now I have it too. So
I'll research it. Maybe I'll have an answer for next time. They said Betsy DeVoe or DeVos, however you say that, is likely. I don't know. See, again, I don't know if she was actually picked or if she's just being like highly considered. But they were saying like Trump's planning on bringing her back in charge of education. And I know she got a lot of flack from the left because she's a businesswoman, not an education person. But I think that's what we need, especially if they are going to restructure the whole thing. But imagine having like Vivek and Charlie Kirk in on that and having a
Mhm.
whole team, that would make me feel good about these like massive changes.
I'm honestly not even familiar with her. So I
Yeah,
can't
I
even
don't know a
know
whole
that.
lot.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Do you know who Linda McMahon is?
No.
Okay. Do you know who Vince McMahon is?
Yes.
Okay. So Linda is Vince's wife. Okay.
Okay.
And her name is being floated around for director of commerce. And did you watch that Netflix special about Vince McMahon? It was called Mr. McMahon.
No, I've seen clips, and like promotion, but I don't really know what it was about.
Okay, I got fucking hooked after watching the first episode. The dude is insane. And it like went over his whole wrestling career and how he started the WWE or WWF, whatever the fuck it was called. It like changed names partway through. But there was all this controversial shit going on, accusing both him and his wife of being involved in sex trafficking. And Trump was in these episodes because I guess he was a really big supporter of the WWE and they showed him several times in this documentary. And so I think this is kind of a controversial, interesting choice, but she was a major donor to Trump's campaign and she was the director of the Small Business Administration. And reportedly, a senior Trump official told CBS News a couple days ago that the job is hers if she wants it.
So after watching the show, what do you think? Like, was she a bad person? Or
There
hard
was
to say?
never, it was like the way the show ended was these allegations came out. And then it was one of those where, when they do a documentary and they interview so and so like in a room and then they show clips of the life and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So partway through the documentary, Vince McMahon stopped being interviewed because these allegations came out. And then I don't know if he just refused to answer any more questions. She was interviewed throughout the documentary, but nothing was said from either one of them about these allegations. And I think the cases are still ongoing. So I don't know if they can publicly speak about it. But it seems to me, if that ends up being true, that this would not be a good choice.
That would be very controversial to say the least. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know about that one.
Yeah. And then speaking of names that I'm not familiar with, Secretary of the Treasury, the guys that are up for this, there's two hedge fund investors, Steve Besant and John Paulson on the list, Fox Business financial commentator Larry Kudlow, and attorney Robert Lighthizer. And I guess he served as the US trade rep in Trump's first administration. So he's familiar with Trump's tariff program because he worked with that program with China, Canada, and Mexico. But again, I don't know who any of these guys are. And I think anything is better than what we currently have. And
Yeah, true.
And then there's still we still don't know what roles Elon Musk and RFK Jr. are going to be playing. But again, I have to assume they are going to be in key positions.
Yeah, I mean, all they talked about was Elon Musk coming in. I forget what the name of the position was, but basically getting rid of all the wasteful spending. So I would imagine that would still be the case. And then RFKJ, he's got to be like the head of the whole health thing. I don't know what the title would be or whatever, but yeah, I'm sure that they'll be up at the top. So we're in good hands.
Yeah, and this is just really exciting to me because I feel like this is the first time that it's not just all of these lifelong political swamp people that are moving around different positions in the government, and I just think this is going to be so cool. And I'm really excited. The picks he's made so far are amazing. And we will keep you guys informed on what's coming up when we hear who else he picks. But we have to go off topic because Stephanie, we need to give an update on Peanut the squirrel, okay? Because this situation is just so fucking weird. And the Department of Environmental Conservation is now doing this whole internal investigation. And remember, you were questioning when we did this episode a couple weeks ago, like one of the investigators who raided the house was bit on the hand by the squirrel. And you were like, shouldn't he have been wearing gloves? And I was like, yeah, you would think they'd be in like full protective gear. And so I was reading this article in the New York Post, and they were saying that the officers were all wearing heavy protective gloves. And then not only were like Peanut and Fred the raccoon euthanized, but they were fucking decapitated. And like nobody's giving answers. Not Governor Hochul's office, not the DEC, not the state health department, not the local Chemung County Health Department. Like they're all refusing to share any of the test results that were conducted to see if the animals had rabies. There's no answers or comments about the status of the officer who was allegedly wounded by being bitten. Like there's just so many fucking unanswered questions.
Yeah. So, okay, this is totally random, but my best friend worked at a vet clinic for many years. And she always told me this story because it happened all the time. But she's like, the only way that you can know for sure if an animal has rabies is to decapitate it. And I'm not sure why. Like, I guess they have to look at the brain or something. But I do remember her telling me like all these horror stories of working at a vet where like things like that happened. So it's just, it makes the story so much worse though, because it's like, what was the whole purpose? Were they trying to save these animals or not? Because clearly they did a piss poor job. And then, yeah, why are they being silent about it? Not a good look right now.
No. And like, according to the CDC, rabies test results are usually available between 24 to 72 hours after the animal's euthanized. And then results are sent to the state's, it's called the DOH Wadsworth Center, and that they're typically available the following day, unless it's like a weekend and then it's the next workday. But this happened like almost 2 weeks ago? Like what was it, the 30th, I think? Almost 2 weeks ago, right? And rabies is like a deadly public health risk, and yet we've heard absolutely nothing. And so, according to this New York Post article, the Wadsworth Center is supposed to publish monthly rabies reports, but they haven't published any rabies reports since fucking June. And they're refusing to answer if they even received any specimens from the county for the past few weeks. And they told the Post, like, if you want to know something, go file a FOIA request. Like, what the fuck is that? So the Post actually got a copy of the search warrant, and there's no mention of any concern about rabies or any imminent danger with these animals. And the only thing the warrant states is that there was suspicions about a squirrel and a raccoon being unlawfully housed at the residence.
Well, yeah. And if you get rabies as a human and you don't administer the shots within like 24 hours, you die. Like they have to do it right away. And I know that because my daughter was bit when she was 3 years old by a dog that did not have his rabies vaccine. And like the pediatrician was like, if we don't get an answer in the next 24 hours, I'm going to do the shots. And they're really painful and terrible. And so it's like, clearly if the guy didn't die, it's been 2 weeks, then it wasn't rabies, And obviously, like if they're not saying anything, it looks bad because after all the public backlash, if there was something significant, like let's say the squirrel or the raccoon did have rabies, they would say that. They would say, "Oh, we had to go and get it out because it was carrying a deadly disease and we did the right thing." So the fact that they're not sharing that just shows they fucked up.
Yeah, and it's like I just want to know where it all went wrong, okay?
Yeah.
Because and like the cop in me wants to have faith in the officers, right? But this just doesn't make any sense. And like the article was saying that this investigation started back in January. So that's like almost a year ago, right? I guess they received their first complaint about Peanut back in January, and they gave a warning to the owner. And then the owner said that he released Peanut into the wild, right? But then the agency started getting more complaints. So they went on the guy Longo's social media accounts, and they saw that he lied and he still had the squirrel. And then now he's had a raccoon. And so that's what prompted the search warrant. And like, okay, fair enough. Like, I can get that. But why the complete lack of transparency on the part of the state? Like, I get when there's a law enforcement investigation, there are certain things you don't make public, but the rabies results, like, shouldn't you at least release the rabies results?
The whole thing is mind-blowing. They have been investigating a pet squirrel since January in a state where there is crime, like people can't even ride the subway. I mean, it's just blowing my mind. And it's like, why do they care? It's this guy's private residence. He lives on a farm. I just don't understand in what world it's okay that they, send in a team of 12 people to tear apart his house and kill his animals. And I don't know if you've seen the videos of him walking through the house after they raided it. They went through every square inch. It's like they broke stuff. They left his belongings like all over the floor. And it's just like, why go to that length over a pet squirrel? None of it makes sense. It makes me think someone was out to get him. And I don't know. I just think the fact that New York's been so quiet about it means they know they screwed up and they're trying to wait for it to just blow over. I think it's crazy.
Yeah, completely. Which is why we had to update on it, because I just thought it was so fucking strange.
I know. Peanut the squirrel. Well, at least his memory will live on in all of us.
Yeah, I remember what was it? The other day I was talking about how a squirrel ran across the stage during Kamala's speech. Well, I guess something similar happened at like a baseball game, some major baseball or football game or something. I didn't make any notes on it, but it was like last week where a squirrel ran across the field and people were posting all this shit on social media like, okay, now the ghost of Peanut is at the games.
Well, I hope the ghost of Peanut haunts all of those agents that did that to him. Okay, well, I got to end on one last thing that I think is interesting because it has to do with New York. And guess what they just announced after Trump's victory? They're all of a sudden going to stop handing out debit cash cards to migrants. So it's like just beautiful. It's like, once again, Trump's not even in office yet, and he's already having quite an impact. So I thought that was amazing.
It is. And we're just going to see it fucking fall apart.
Yep.
And the other thing we have to say, today is Veterans Day. So happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans and military personnel, and thank you for your service. And I hope those of you who are still active duty military are excited that you're now going to get to serve under a fucking epic president that's going to treat the military right.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Yeah, happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. And yeah, it's gonna be good. I can feel it in the air. Things are turning positive.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday.